Well, good day, my friends, and thank you for joining me in the Roots of America Project studio. Today we'll be discussing why the Supreme Court of the United States is far more important than most Americans actually understand. It's often referred to as the court of last resort because what the Supreme Court decides pretty much overrules what any other court in America decides. While a Supreme Court ruling can be overturned, it can take years and a lot of money in legal fees to possibly change a decision, and it doesn't happen very often. Have you ever actually gone to the court's website to see what types of cases are being argued? I think you'd be amazed at what major changes are happening to our country and our laws without most of us ever paying attention. This includes overturning laws that a majority of the public voted for. Your local proposition or issue might win on election day, but if the Supreme Court determines it's not constitutional, well, you lose. And since we're a nation of laws, which is a good thing, the rulings from the Supreme Court can protect laws that you may not agree with or overturn laws that you think should stand. What really concerns me is that most of the decisions which will affect you and your family, and me for decades to come, never make the nightly news, and 90% of Americans never know until that decision has already been made. As a matter of fact, a Supreme Court ruling and decision is so important that an appointment to the Supreme Court is one of the most important decisions a president will ever make. Well, why is that? Well, stay tuned. As with most of our episodes, this topic can occupy hours of discussion, but today we'll be covering these three important points. Number one, why an appointment to the Supreme Court is the most important decision a president ever makes. Number two, should we have limits on the amount of time a justice serves on the court? And then we'll wrap up with, does the Supreme Court have too much power? To understand why a Supreme Court appointment is so important for a president, you need only go back to a statement I made a little earlier. Decisions from the Supreme Court can last for decades to come. Since it's so hard to overturn a court decision, what they decide can have an effect for a very long time. Here's a staggering fact. From 1946 all the way to 2020, there have been 9,095 decisions made by the court. Of that entire number, only 161 were actually overturned. A president typically only has an effect for the time he or she is in office. Maybe a few of their policies last for a while, but as soon as a new president comes into office, they usually sign, 100 executive orders and overturn much of what the previous president did. However, decisions from the Supreme Court can't be overturned by a president and therefore can affect us for decades. Now, on a side note, we will have at some point in the future an episode about my opinions on presidential executive orders. Yikes. So, if a president gets to pick a new Supreme Court justice, that president's legacy can last well beyond their term in office. After all, a president will pick a justice who aligns with their political ideology. Now, I know the Supreme Court is supposed to be independent, but they all have their political leanings. And how do political leanings affect the court? Because the Supreme Court decides which cases it will even hear and then rule on. If they don't think your case has merit, then you won't get to argue in front of the court. And all it takes is 5 of the 9 justices to vote to hear or dismiss your case, and that's it. If the court tends to side with your political ideals, then, that simple majority can be a good thing. But if the court leans away from your ideals, then cases important to you and our nation may never get heard and can't be changed once they're decided on. Here's a great example that happened recently. The state of Texas passed a law prohibiting abortion after 6 weeks from conception. The law was challenged and sent to the Supreme Court. The conservative-leaning court ruled in favor of Texas. Now, if you're a conservative and believe in the right to life, you're happy. But if you're a liberal and believe in the right to choose, you're not happy. And you have a law that will take a lot of time and money to even possibly overturn. Now, another way that political ideologies affect a presidential legacy has to do with a term you may have heard recently: stacking the court. This is a process where the U.S. Congress creates legislation allowing for additional members above the 9 to sit on the Supreme Court. Then the president can appoint new members to fill those additional seats on the court. So, for example, if a liberal president is facing the decisions of a conservative-leaning court, that president can appoint more liberal members to the court who are more favorable to his or her political ideals. I think it's a really bad idea. and will only cause problems for the foundation of America. Why is that? Well, since a president can only serve a maximum of 8 years, you know the next president will then try and get Congress to allow even more justices on the Supreme Court to try and pull it back to his or her different political ideals. As I've said on many occasions, elections have consequences. If you want to keep America free and special, then support a great presidential candidate who understands the effects of Supreme Court decisions, and then show up and vote. Now, based on what we just discussed, should we have limits on the amount of time a justice is on the court? Term limits. Well, you may or may not be aware, but Supreme Court justices serve for their entire life. Yes, the Supreme Court justices serve a life term and can only be removed by death, voluntary retirement, or by impeachment from the U.S. Congress. Interestingly, the U.S. Congress has never impeached a Supreme Court justice in the history of our country. The idea behind why a Supreme Court justice serves for life was to eliminate being affected by the changing political whims of the presidency. If justices changed every time there was a new president, that would cause a lot of headaches and changing court opinions and, quite possibly, put our entire country into a state of constant flux. However, there are times when term limits might be beneficial. What about when a justice gets too old or has maybe mental instability? They may not want to admit it, but their decision-making abilities would be in question. And if they aren't able to render a competent decision, they may recuse or excuse themselves from a case, which could result in a tie. And when there's a tie on the Supreme Court, it means no decision, and whatever the lower court ruled is what stands. What's a little scary about that is in many times a lower court might be very partisan in how they make their decisions. And we often have to take that case all the way up to the Supreme Court to hopefully get an accurate interpretation of the Constitution. Now, just think, if the decision made by a lower court dramatically affects you or your family or maybe even your business, you have no court of last resort. Then you're stuck with the ruling from your local courts, and you can only go back to those same judges if you want to appeal. So, should we have some type of term limit? What about 20 years for a term on the Supreme Court? That would make it much longer than a president serves and be outside the average length of service in the U.S. Senate, but still create an opportunity for an aging justice to leave gracefully and then bring in a new justice. Are there any downsides to a 20-year term limit for a Supreme Court justice? Let me know your thoughts. Now on to our last point. Does the Supreme Court have too much power? That's been brought up many times over my life because the 9 justices interpret the law and give their opinion of how a case they're hearing aligns with the Constitution. Now, many times in rendering their decision, the specific case they're looking at doesn't have any direct alignment with the Constitution, and all it takes is that simple majority to think one way or the other, and the whole case, which can affect us for decades, becomes the law of the land. Think of major decisions over the years with abortion, contraception, religious freedoms, and more. Depending on the makeup of the court, whether a majority conservative or a majority liberal, the decision can go opposite of the way you think it should go. And once they make that decision, it can take years to overturn. And while that case is in appeal, the original decision still stands. So you could have a decision that affects our liberties, which we are stuck with until hopefully many years later, the case is overturned. Think back to the Patriot Act, which was deemed constitutional after the attacks on our country on September 11, 2001. There were several restrictions to our basic liberties, which we mostly agreed to due to the fear that rightfully existed after 9/11. However, over 20 years later, many of those restrictions are still in place. All it takes is 5 justices to agree to an interpretation, and we feel the effects for a very long time. Does that mean the court has too much power? Not necessarily, but it does show very clearly that one incorrect appointment to the Supreme Court can have a very long-lasting impact on our liberty, freedom, and security. So what can we and our elected representatives do if the court starts making decisions which are contrary to the long-term protection of the foundation of America? Unfortunately, there isn't a lot we can do, which is why I say regularly that elections have consequences. We must get off the sidelines and support a candidate for president during every election cycle who truly understands the power and beauty of the Constitution and the importance of rendering accurate interpretations of our Constitution. The founding documents are just as relevant today as they were in 1776, and we must make sure the highest court in the land accurately defends our laws and our Constitution. So please take a few moments in the next week or so and go to the Supreme Court website and see some of the cases which are being decided on. They may directly affect you, your family, and your business. As we wrap up this episode, please take a few minutes and head to our website at rootsofamericaproject.com, sign up for our free newsletter, and maybe purchase some of our awesome swag to support the project and show others that you support the foundation of America. So thank you so much. Have a great week, and I will see you on our next episode. Have a great day.